I'm Janice Fiamengo of the University of Ottawa. My theme today is the cost of gender studies programs. So far, I've covered two non-ideological reasons why women's studies programs should be closed down. First, because these courses make activist ideology rather than knowledge their priority. And second, because their attempt to draw from all disciplines makes it impossible for them to teach any subject with integrity. My third reason is cost. At a time when most academic programs are struggling with budget shortfalls and hiring freezes, the millions of dollars that go into gender studies programs every year could certainly be better spent. What kind of money are we talking about? Well, I can give only a rough estimate, but I've done the best job that I could based on my analysis of the 66 post-secondary institutions that offer women's and gender studies courses in Canada. I tabulated the number of faculty teaching in women's and gender studies programs. To do this, I looked first at universities across the country that offer at least an undergraduate degree in gender studies, not just a one-year certificate, and that hire professors into a designated women's and gender studies department. So not a program that simply borrows professors from other departments, which some do. Out of the 66 post-secondary institutions in Canada that offer some gender and women's studies courses, I found 24 departments, ranging from the University of Victoria in British Columbia to Memorial University in Newfoundland, that offer a degree-granting program and employ designated women's studies professors. I counted a total of 143 full-time and tenured or tenure-track instructors. Calculating that such professors make an average yearly salary of $110,000, I came up with a figure of $15,730,000 in base salary. That excludes employer costs such as pension, health, and other benefits, which I calculated at roughly 25% of that amount, or $3,932,500, for a total of $19,662,500. I list the programs and the numbers of professors in the text I've posted on the Studio Brule blog. Next, I looked at the much larger number of adjunct, cross-appointed, and part-time teachers of women's and gender studies courses. These may be professors normally associated with a separate department, such as law or geography, who teach only specific women's and gender studies courses, or they may be part-timers who teach regularly for a women's studies program, but are not paid a regular professor's salary. I counted 528 such instructors, and calculating their pay at $20,000 per instructor per course, I arrived at a total of $10,560,000, which, when adjusted for a lower rate of employer cost, 12%, came to $11,827,200. In addition to the salary costs of full, part-time, or adjunct professors, there are, of course, many other costs of running an academic program, including office space for administrative personnel, office space for instructors, classroom space, and all the associated costs of phone, heat, light equipment, furniture, and so on. In order to be on the conservative side in my estimate, I restricted my calculation of these costs to those programs that have designated women's and gender studies faculty. I estimated that the costs for an administrative office, including one secretary, equipment, furniture, and space, would run at around $55,000 per year, while office space for instructors and all related costs, calculating for an average of 10 offices, should come in at around $60,000 per year. An average of 10 classrooms with high-tech equipment and also factoring in janitorial services would add yearly costs of about $80,000, thus totaling $195,000 annually in administrative and physical costs. restricting the calculation of these costs to those 24 major programs that I identified, assuming that many of the costs associated with smaller programs are absorbed by the faculties and departments that contribute their personnel, I came up with a figure of $4,680,000 for the ancillary, administrative, and physical costs of running gender and women's studies programs. So my extremely conservative total for all personnel and material costs of running women's and gender studies programming in Canada is $36,169,700. This direct tally, pretty impressive, is only the tip of the proverbial iceberg and doesn't take into account the many other positions, institutes, centers, offices, task forces, and administrative bodies that have been created on university campuses, either as a direct result of women's and gender studies lobbying or in relation to the academic feminist mandate. For example, nearly every university now has a women's center, a women-only space involved in providing services and feminist advocacy. And there are also many special officers, counselors, advisors, and watchdogs to act on behalf of female students and staff, to devise new policies for the university, especially around sexual assault and sexual harassment, and to monitor the university's compliance with feminist policies already in place. My university, which is an entirely typical mid to large size institution, has a human rights office with a large team of 2 directors and a dozen policy analysts, advisors, and officers to deal with harassment, employment equity, and discrimination complaints, as well as to promote diversity and inclusion training, tests, speakers, and workshops with a stress on women's issues. The salaries alone of the Human Rights Office staff almost certainly exceed $1 million per year at just that one university. And this already large figure doesn't begin to represent the real amount of course material being disseminated at universities that is either partially or fully affected by feminist assumptions. Because, of course, academic feminism isn't confined to the women's and gender studies programs. It has spread its withering tentacles into many humanities and social sciences courses in order to focus on the contributions of women, to highlight women's past and present suffering, to applaud female heroism and capability while emphasizing male brutality and unearned privilege, and to suggest that it is entirely appropriate and even necessary for governments and legal institutions and whole societies to pay more attention to women's concerns and women's lives than to men's. The motif of female grievance and male guilt runs through much of university coursework today. The only areas not already deeply undermined by feminist parasitism are the STEM subjects, but there are worrying signs that even these are feeling the impact of feminist pressure to change the way they're taught, to attract more women, and to add feminist content to the subjects. This incursion of feminism into STEM will be a subject for a number of upcoming Fiamengo files, for its potential implications are severe. When I think of all the other uses to which the money promoting the feminist agenda might be put, I am astounded by the manner in which universities everywhere have allowed themselves to be hijacked. What we need is more research on the origins and treatment of disease, on new technologies to transform our lives for the better, on new understandings of our physical world, of human nature, and of our history and literature to enable our culture to flourish. We do not need yet another generation of young people indoctrinated to believe without understanding that gender is a social construct, and that the feminine is culturally marginalized. Why is this allowed to go on? Through a combination of cultural blindness, ideological zealotry, and professional self-interest. Our culture has been misled to see feminism as necessary and beneficial And those people who do not believe that generally choose to stay silent for fear of backlash. Well, let's at least start talking about the end of the feminist hegemony at our institutions of higher education. Ultimately, if feminist control doesn't end, the institutions themselves will. Gender studies needs to die.